that interpretation in Mandarin language is available, and also captioning services is available throughout the session until 3 p.m. The interpretation function is available at the bottom of your screen where you will see a globe. You could press and then select the language that you prefer. If you would like the caption service, it's also available at the bottom of the Zoom platform where you could click the caption or show subtitle. On that note, if you have any question, please feel free to drop your questions or concern on the chat box as well. We will begin the recap session in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, good morning to everyone. This is the session 7 of the ITU Regional Development Forum 2020. Thank you for attending the last day of RDF. We have had very exciting 3 days in the past. And as usual, we do this recap of the day before so that you can continue the discussion, taking into account perhaps what was discussed previously. And as my colleague Sean mentioned, we have a Chinese interpretation and captioning that you can use on your screen. And as my colleague mentioned in the chat, this is a live broadcast on YouTube. And you can, of course, review it after the session as well. So next slide, please. We had a very exciting day yesterday too. And we started with the topic on policy and regulation. You know, in the ICT community, we all talk about evidence-based policy making and regulation, but um, we hardly see that evidence everywhere. So we wanted to promote some of the approaches and initiatives that ITU is undertaking, you know, what kind of evidence we can bring to ICT policy and regulation. So we discussed the Universal Service Fund, taxation, e-waste, as well as the innovative mechanisms to stimulate the policy and regulation discussion. It's just that there were many exciting ideas. So we will be happy to capture all of them in the report. And the day followed with the ICT and SMEs. It was equally exciting. We talked about the incubators and digital ecosystems and how SMEs can drive the ICT development in Asia and the Pacific. And that was very well uh, how can I say, followed by the discussion on academia. So we had a session with UNU and our colleague from the academia team uh, in Geneva to talk about what is the best way to bring the academia and research to the ICT practitioners, including policy making. And that was also followed by a discussion on ICT capacity. So it was agreed in the session that this COVID, of course, had negative impact on, for instance, a number of people losing jobs. But at the same time, the panelists shared with us that it created an opportunity. There are new jobs which are being created because of COVID-19. And the way we are tackling this transition. So we hope that these challenges and opportunities will be taken up in our partnership and joint initiatives and ITU's work. And finally, at the end of yesterday, we had a cybersecurity session. This is also quite important to develop a secure and reliable infrastructure application and the use so that people can uh, feel people can build trust in the IT systems in Asia and Pacific. Next slide, please. So I would like to show a little bit of highlights on some of the panelists. We had quite a extensive and informative sessions throughout. And please do follow us on social media because the key highlights and information on the speakers are posted together with some of these photos. Next slide, please. And I would also like to remind the participants that we published the report on the implementation of regional initiatives of ITU Regional Office from 2019 to 2020. So your views, comments, questions are welcome. And we look forward to using it and planning our activities in 2021. Next slide, please. So today we have a very important session coming up on ICT for all, because if we don't ensure digital inclusion, people will continue being left behind in this digital era. So we look forward to hearing from the panelists and the participants, what's the best mechanism for us to make sure that it doesn't happen. And after that, session 8 is exciting for us that this is really a concrete way forward. We have a global initiative, global conference called WTDC, a World Telecommunication Development Conference next year. And that's the venue where a lot of important decisions on ICT are taken. So we hope that your views and opinions and initiatives will be incorporated and taken up towards the WTDC. So we will map out the steps and meetings and mechanisms to do that. And then we have a closing session, very short remarks on what happened, what transpired for the past 4 days. And for those participants who want to have a say, who couldn't say, who wanted to ask questions but felt shy, please join us at the informal networking session from 2:45 to 3:45 on this channel. We will be available and we will be happy to connect and network and share our views, hear your views on the topics that perhaps we couldn't cover during the session. So this is the program of the day. Next slide, please. And as I said, the YouTube is videos are available and it's like broadcast. So this is the information for you to perhaps view later or to share with your colleagues and on your network. Next slide, please. And finally, this is the last slide. Please follow us and share the information coming from this forum. And I think this is critical for our partnership and joint initiatives moving forward. So thank you. And Sean, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Asuko-san. And again, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us at this very first session of day 4, which is ICTs for All. It is my pleasure to introduce the moderator for this session, Professor Masahito Kawamori, who will be leading 4 other panelists to discuss on issues that are related to bridging the digital divide, not just at the country level, but also in the societal level. On that note, Professor Kawamori, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. My name is Masahito Kawamori. I'm currently a rapporteur of accessibility and digital health at ITU Telecom section. And also I'm a professor at Keio University in Japan. It is my great pleasure and honor to moderate this session on digital inclusion and ICT for all. And let me just say a few words to set the stage of this session. As we know, as the world is going through this COVID-19 pandemic, it is the most vulnerable segment of the society that's affected by this rapid change. There are older people, persons with disabilities, and those underprivileged and poor people, as well as children. And this point was emphatically pointed out by the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, when he said that persons with disabilities are the hardest hit in the population globally. And this applies to other segments of the society, such as older people, as I mentioned. Because of this new normal that forces us to be physically distant, the role that information communication technologies, ICT, can play in coping with the COVID-19 pandemic has become even more prominent and important. And therefore, ICT should be able to help not just a few segments of the society, but all people in the world. In short, ICT and digital technologies should be accessible to all and inclusive. That's the background, and this session will provide a platform for ITU members and partners to exchange ideas on how to make ICT and digital technology inclusive, how to bridge the gap, digital gap among people through partnership and collaboration and initiatives with various stakeholders. What would be the roadmap, actions, activities, and projects that should be implemented and eventually leading to a more inclusive, equal access and use of ICTs for all? This objective of the session is to explore the strategies and solutions to build back better to accelerate digital inclusion to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and commitment to promote greater partnership at the global, regional, and national level to accelerate digital inclusion. And that's the background. And I hope without much further ado, I'd like to, for the benefit of time, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Notachat Chintakanan, to present his presentation. Please.
Thank you very much. Ms. Asuko Okuda, Regional Director, ITU Asia Pacific, Professor Kawamori Masahito, Moderator, all panelists, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, Sawasdee krab. First of all, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the ITU Regional Office in the Asia Pacific for hosting the Regional Development Forum during this week. And also thank for inviting Office of the BTC to share our progress in this very important forum under the important topic of ICT for all. As you well aware that while we have focused on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals during the past years, the pandemic of COVID-19 has further expanded the inequalities and magnified the impact of digital divide. The challenges of social and economic issues has been occurred around the globe. Thus, ICT and connectivity are very important in order to bridge the digital divide between urban and rural areas. The rich and the poor, men and women, as well as the young and the old. Digital connectivity is also very important in keeping people together and bridging the digital gap. In this presentation, I will share with you the recent of Thailand measures that, in my view, play the important roles in bridging digital divide and thus enable us to reach the goal of ICT for all. They are, number one, how we respond and mitigate the impact of COVID-19 outbreak. Number two, distance education during the outbreak. And number three, role of MBTC in Girls in ICT Day in Thailand. Starting with number one, what we did during the COVID-19 outbreak. Thailand, just as many countries around the world, we were like, during the beginning of the year, we were hit by the COVID-19, and out of the blue, it became clear that it's something like going to be big, it's something serious, it's something that can be spreading easily. And not so long after New Year, we learned that we have to close down, we have to create a social distance, and with that, we know that on one hand, we have to make sure that our citizens are safe. Thailand will be safe. But on the other hand, we need to make sure that whereas we make people safe, because, in order to make people safe, we have to close down. We have to create social distance. All work should be carried on because the country cannot stop. The economy cannot be stopped. So that's why MBTC, we work closely with public agencies in providing the assistance to the government in mitigating the impact of COVID-19. As you can see, we didn't work alone. There is something huge, something challenging. And when such challenging scenario occurred, all concerned agencies join hands together. In MBTC part, during the outbreak of COVID-19, we have coordinated with telecom operators in Thailand to provide the extra 10 gigabyte to mobile phone users who currently have the internet package not more than 10 gigabyte for free of charge, because we know that people need to work and mobile phone is something that people can work on. So we make sure that if they don't have enough package, that wouldn't be the obstacle for them to continue their work. We also fixed broadband users who currently have speed below 100 megabits per second will be automatically upgraded to 100 Mbps for 30 days from 10 April 2020 onwards. That was the time when Thailand was in the lockdown. People work from home, private sector, public sector, we try to encourage people to work from home as much as possible. So we should ensure that the broadband would be fast enough for people to work. We also offer 100 minutes voice call for 45 days for free of charge to mobile user for number per operator. Mobile user would be able to register from the 1st to 15 May 2020. It applies to both prepaid and postpaid mobile user. As you know that in Thailand, we still have a lot of prepaid user. So we have to make sure that it applies to both. However, subscriptions by foreigners or corporate names are not eligible for the scheme. Mobile user can press *170*, followed by their 13-digit ID number, then press the sharp sign and then dial, so that they can get the 100 minutes voice call. So this to ensure that people can still communicate, because you might have the broadband, you have the mobile that work, but in order to make sure that the job be carried on successfully, people need to be able to communicate, and that we think that this offer would help during the time of the close down. Now moving on to distance education via satellite, which is the second issue. Youth are very important, we all know that, and education is the key factor that we need to make sure all youth can have access to education even in the time of lockdown. This is why Office of MBTC has always been supportive and encouraged the education of youth in Thailand. The good example is that we have supported the Ministry of Education's distance learning program while providing a permit to use the spectrum in the broadcasting and television business to broadcast in normal definition for 6 months in 17 channels in order to promote education and the learning of youth when all schools and universities are closed and help reduce the risk of infections. As you can see, everything hit quickly, just as, everywhere in the world. We didn't have much time in advance to know that the close down would happen. And when the close down happened, we know that youth would stay at home, the school would be closed. And, not all schools have the luxury to provide the distance learning right away. So we'll make sure that some school that, they still don't have the option, they can use our spectrum that were given, and the students can simply watch via television and continue with their learning. So with that, we make sure that during the closed down period, the students still gain knowledge and they'll still progress. If they are in grade 3, for example, they still progress. It's not that their progress needs to be stopped and they have to restart after the COVID, but make sure that everything continue. So this is our effort in terms of distance learning. Moving on to the Girls in ICT Day, as I mentioned that equalities have to be given priority to, and digital divide in all fronts have to be diminished. And that girls is also somewhat important, girls and youth. And during 2020 Girls in ICT Day in Thailand, MBTC also take good And NBTC also take good part in celebrating this important day. Nearly 200 students participated in online platform. This year event promoting the empowering and encouraging girls and young women to take up leadership roles in ICT sector, digital skills, as well as to raise awareness for women on online safety. The training program in this event also focused on smart farming, cyber safety, and artificial intelligence, or AI. This event can inspire and encourage girls and young women in Thailand to consider the study and careers in the growing field of ICTs, reaping the benefits of the growing demand in the ICT sectors. Lastly, MBTC Thailand will continue to support the promotion of girls in ICT Day in Thailand in 2021. We have already laid out the plan together closely with ITU Regional Office in Asia Pacific. We will continuously push forward the role of youth and girls in Thailand in order that they can take up their career in ICTs. We also would like to empower all youth and women to take leadership role in their own communities. And it is very inspiring that the way we do it in Girls in ICT in Thailand is that we had the alumni. And during the 2020 Girls in ICT Day, the alumni that used to join the Girls in ICT Day program in the past come back, and they have become a very successful business woman, young women exactly, and then they share their story with all the young girls, and you could see that all the young girls, they are very energetic, they are ready to learn, and they know that with ICT knowledge in their hands, they would be able to be successful. They would, that would allow them to conquer the world, and they know that, and you can see that they are eager to learn, and that was very, very impressive. And we will continue that effort this year. So hopefully some of you might be able to follow us and may join us in the 2021 Girls in ICT Day in Thailand. And even though I've been talking a lot about COVID-19, and even though the COVID-19 in Thailand is now getting better, our effort will not stop here. We will still make sure that we can bridge the digital divide. We still making sure that ICT will be the ICT for all people in all corners in Thailand. They will be able to access this very important technology, and that this technology will be a very important opportunity for them to make their life better and to be successful in their life. So please be ensured that MBTC and Thailand will work will spare no efforts in making sure that it happens. And we will closely cooperate with ITU regional office, relevant agencies, and international organizations in Thailand to help promoting this important event to the great success. Once again, thank you very much for having me speaking in this very important forum under the very important issues. Thank you very much and ขอบคุณครับ
Thank you very much for your fine presentation. If there's any question, I would like to invite everyone to write on the chat. And if there's any comments from the panelists, because Mr. Nota Chat has to leave pretty soon, right? If I understand correctly. If not, I'd like to move on to the next presentation. Mr. Mirwais Nakmal, but you'll be talking about his government's involvement in the digital inclusion. Please go ahead, please.
Thank you, Professor Kawamori, and thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure meeting you all, and I thank the ITU colleagues for establishing this forum where countries can exchange ideas and share their experiences, what worked for them and what didn't. It gives me a great pleasure to share some of the effort that Afghanistan have put on in terms of making ensure that ICT is used and available for everyone. Just before moving that, I work with Ministry of Communication in IT of Afghanistan as a plan and policy director. So the areas that we are currently focusing for this year are how are we going to work on digital transformation, and the two areas which my directorate is responsible is to look after how can we ensure the last mile connectivity and as well as the digital literacy. So these are the two important topics that we are focusing this year in 2021, and how do we make sure that everyone is connected. When it comes to connectivity, the term connectivity is still based on the ITU definition. It is tricky for the countries who, like Afghanistan, that are underdeveloped. It is a costly process that includes lots of resources to be put in. And then ensuring connectivity to the rural area is something challenging. But again, Ministry of Communication and IT of Afghanistan have do understand that this is an important area that needs to be focused on. So what we did, we moved on and started working on diverse technologies that could enhance connectivity. We did not stick to the fiber optic, but we went all the way technology neutral, whatever best worked for the country to ensure connectivity. The broadband penetration is a challenging portion here, considering the landlocked country where we do not have connectivity or direct linkage with the submarine cable, and we are relying on our neighbors to establish those sort of connectivity is a challenging part that may affect on the prices of we are offering to the citizens. At the same time, one of the sources that you require to include everyone is the electricity, which again, in underdeveloped countries, electricity is a scarce resource, and people do have limitations in terms of having access to a quality electricity. So in overall, what ministry did, we are working on a strategic plan on how we are gonna ensure that last mile connectivity is done. We have started different initiatives. We started working on infrastructure sharing of the MNOs. How will that infrastructure sharing? Because since infrastructure sharing or establishing the infrastructure for connectivity is a costly process. and how do we ensure that everyone is connected with the least amount of funding spent. So for that, we started working on the infrastructure sharing model. At the same time, the provinces or the villages that have limited number of population, where companies, either private or government companies, are hesitant in investing because the amount or the rate of investment or the rate of benefit they will be getting from that investment is limited. We started on providing subsidies for building those infrastructures. And that is to ensure that the cost of the infrastructure building is shared between the government and the private sector, so that private sector can show interest in reaching out to everyone. At the same time, with the regulatory authority, we are working on developing certain monitoring tools to ensure that all those regulation and policies are being applied or deployed while we are connecting everyone. And how do we ensure that everyone is connected? So those sort of incentive programs have been done from Afghanistan or from the government side. The other tricky part is the digital literacy. When it comes to digital literacy, when we talk about everyone needs to be included, there are certain barriers that needs to be addressed on a policy level. The first is if we are talking about digital transformation, we need to address how do we make the contents localized. And people who have a limitation in understanding the contents needs to be literated. Another way, people are still using broadband on two platforms, either it's a YouTube or Facebook. Now, how do government work on establishing, and it also applies to private sector, how do they develop demand for data consumption? If you start developing demand for data consumption, on the other hand, you need people that they should be aware in terms of technicality or the usage of internet. In that way, you are creating a market where private sector will show more interest in investing. So it's a value chain that needs to be, in each partner needs to contribute and as well as work together. In that sense, we started working on digital literacy. How do we ensure that women are literate enough in terms of digital skills and digital literacy that they can use the technology? We are in the process of starting an initiative that we refer to it as Girls in ICT. Another term, we are providing online courses to girls who can learn digital skill and as well as coding, so they can contribute and they can also be, it could be a source of income for them. At the same time, if women have, specifically in Afghanistan, have limitation in coming out and working out due to certain barriers, then this method of reaching out technology to their home and training them on how they can take part in developing or in coding, that is something we believe that could contribute to as well in terms of digital inclusion. The other barriers for the accessibility is your operation and maintenance cost of the infrastructure. Since security is one of the concerns that is affecting the current operation and maintenance cost of the infrastructure, it is increasing and affecting the data rates we are providing or the packages that the people are using. The companies needs to somehow cover up those costs in terms of increasing the prices of the package. At the same time, the model of infrastructure sharing are somehow successful, but somehow they are not, because the insurgents are opposed of those infrastructure that are owned by government. They are opposed of that. And the private companies are somehow hesitant in using those infrastructure that are established by the government. So the complex situation here is somehow affecting on the daily life of the people, and as well as the accessing people and using the ICT. On the other hand, if you're talking about digital transformation for the public services, we are also lacking the skills for civil servants to use those transformations. In other words, if we start digitalizing a public process, let's say a birth certificate, we need to recreate the process from the scratch, because because people have been working on a bureaucratic system for the past 20 to 25 years, and they are getting used to it. Now, when you're talking about a change, all the change elements needs to be studied, resources needs to be provided, and utilization of those resources needs to be directly managed. So in that sort of context, countries like Afghanistan are having problems. But on the other hand, if you see how IT is affecting, or the technology is affecting on our day-to-day process, people are now more welcoming the technology. One of the projects that we did during the COVID-19 epidemic was the higher education learning management system. In a 1-week period, we were able to register and develop a platform for teachers and students at all governmental universities, so they can start their classes online. And within this 1 week, 200,000 students started using that system without having any specific trainings or any sort of go online sessions. They were provided a username and password, and they start using and exploring the system, and that helped them to carry on their lectures. So there has been a different experience throughout this epidemic. At one end, it has been occurs throughout the world, but on the other hand, people are coming out of their comfort zone, and they are ready to explore the good things that technologies can provide. And I think I will sum up my speech here, and I do welcome any questions if colleagues have. So thank you, and that's all from my end.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nakmai. For the benefit of time, I would like to move on to the next speaker. I think we have some time to wrap up before we close. So I'd like to invite Mr. Samir Pujari to address the M disability or M health from WHO. Digital health, yeah. Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues, and thanks again for having me over here. It's a very, very important discussion and panel today. And especially, I think this topic in the current light of COVID is even more important, because in the health space, we have seen clearly that digital health and the power of digital is something which is extremely crucial to help us prepare for the future of such pandemics and any such health situations, but also to improvise the well-being and lifestyle of the population. And so I think digital health has become a key enabler in the WHO's agenda. And I'm here today to talk about how some of the examples, what WHO is doing in collaboration with our sister agencies at the UN and countries, and also to call on the audience, the members here, to look at how health can be engaged and be entangled into the ICT agenda as well, because together, digital and health, I think, will be tomorrow's health agenda. Let me see if I can switch the slide. If you can go to the next slide, please, Sean. I think you're controlling the slide. Thank you. So let me first start off by talking about digital health to us. How do we define digital health? Digital health for WHO and its member states is primarily a convergence of the digital technology for health, which brings better healthcare to the population. So it's everything. It's not dependent on technology, but it is all things that can enable healthcare service delivery. And I think there's a win-win situation for all the sectors. It's not just the health sector, the different sectors to enable digital health at the country as an institutional system. And it works. We have proof. There's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of positive health outcomes across the board, whether you're talking of emergencies or general health care or rehabilitation care or citizen well-being. I think there's evidence enough in science now to prove that it works and continues to benefit and reap the value of digital health at all. If you can click, please, if you don't mind. Thank you. There is a strong return of investment case that is inbuilt as a combination both from the ICT side and from the health side. So I think we've seen business models whereby health expenditures have gone down, ICT product services have increased at the government level. So there's a strong return of investment case that is enabled in there. Click again, please. As I've already mentioned, it enables a strong infrastructure for the governments and enhances the government's capacity to deliver on services on a real-time basis as much as possible through very simple mechanisms. It doesn't have to have high-end technology. It needs just very basic, simplistic information and technology services that can be used to deliver these to the massive age of population. If you can click again, please. And of course, particularly it will help achieve faster the SDG goals for the countries on goal 3, at least from the health perspective, and in general, enhance the general health index of the countries overall. You can click next slide, please. We have, as WHO set out, so WHO is a member state-driven organization similar to ITU. Our member states are ministries of health, and we have taken up this agenda of policy making for the governments. Digital health has been endorsed as a global strategy, as a global agenda from the member states. And next week at the World Health Assembly, the member states will be endorsing the global strategy on digital health, which targets 4 broad areas of work. And I think the first one is very crucial here. And the reason I'm talking about is around global collaboration. Together with ITU, we have been working for the last 8 years now in the space of digital health in different areas and have grown substantially the delivery of work both in the region as well as globally. And so I think we need to continue doing this through the ICT side. The successes of these programs in countries, which I'll talk in a minute, are where we have had a strong collaboration between the ministries of health, ministries of ICTs, the different agencies that are responsible for information communication technology at the country level. And I've heard some great examples today from Thailand, from Afghanistan. I think these are the kind of models that we would like to replicate for health as well, and expand it so that the healthcare services can be delivered. The second objective of the strategy is around the implementation focus, where we have, again, it's not just about writing documents, but also taking this collaboration to the ground and making it impactful on the field, on the ground. And that's where I think the strategy comes in hand. The third is about setting the infrastructure. There is no official infrastructure for digital health. Often we've seen in countries the verticality of health working its own in space, technology is working. And I think this is a call for everyone to come together and try to make the best of it. The first time in history, we have the opportunity to actually deliver on the ground to the people-centered care. I mean, we have more cell phones on the planet than human beings. There are more accessible devices. This is the opportunity where we can reach out to the individuals directly and make an impact on the health services. Next slide, please. As I was mentioning, for the last 8 years almost, WHO and ITU have jointly been working on one of these these programs, and there's several other good examples. I just want to highlight this program. The program is called as Be Healthy, Be Mobile, and we've been using mobile technology agnostic of the solution, whether it's SMS, whether it's voice, whether it's apps, depending on the infrastructure in the country. We have been able to use this initiative to help build new solutions, build new infrastructure models, and the country build new business models for service delivery. We've been enabling partnerships at a gross level. We have all the different sectors, whether it's ICTs, whether it's telecoms, whether it's pharma. They've all come together to help in this space, and we've been able to scale several programs at country level in the region, whether it's Philippines, whether in the African subcontinent, in Asian, everywhere. And we have a huge demand. We have about 96 countries right now which have expressed interest in scaling these programs. So I think there's a huge potential, but this is a network. The way we're trying to treat it is that we have to have the interest coming from within the countries and within the different sectors to make this happen. It's often led by the technology sector. We've seen in countries in Egypt, in Senegal, where the technology sector is leading the work of health because there's a strong potential. And so I think there's a lot to be done and a lot of potential to show the health service delivery at this level. Go to the next slide, please. In the interest of time, I'll focus on an example, and there are several examples I'm happy to discuss at length in detail. But I think this is a very sensitive and very core of the problem right now, the aging population. And I think there are several ways we can tackle, because often the question comes in, is this a population which is diverse from technology use? It is not. I mean, we have seen that there are caregivers who are using the technologies, who can be trained, can be equipped to provide aging services. The population themselves, I mean, there's getting more and more savvy population. As we prepare to go in the next couple of decades, we'll see that the aging population is much more tech savvy, and there is potential to give this care to this aging population, which is often at risk of several health conditions, whether they're non-communicable diseases, whether they are mobility specters. So WHO, what we do together with ITU and the global experts and countries is we have developed guidance on how to set up these programs. These are simple business model based technical packages which can explain for anyone how these programs should be set up, how they can be sustained, and how they can be iterated. The programs are there. It's about having the political leadership to implement these. And this is just to give an example of how these programs are set up. WHO and ITU is providing technical support. We're working with different models to replicate these programs in the region. I know there's a lot of interest in Thailand on implementing this program on aging, in India. And I think there's potential to leverage these programs whereby we can set up the infrastructure and then benefit the population, as well as create the business models of service delivery across the board from technology into the health sector and show that collaboration. Because as I said, today's health, and RDG keeps on saying, and Director General, is today's digital health is tomorrow's health. So we have to prepare ourselves as a group together to be able to deliver on this space. Next slide, please. I think that's my last slide. You just mentioned a big thanks and to remind all of us, whether it's in health, whether it's in technology, that we have to ensure that no one is left behind. We have to work together to touch the last mile. So I think that's where I end my talk here, to just with a claim and with the ask to everyone, please think about how we can deliver the best healthcare services using technology. And we are here to help and join hands in any ways that we can help. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very detailed, very interesting presentation. For the interest of time, I'd like to move on to invite the last speaker of this session, Ms. Aiko Kiyama from ASCAP on digital inclusion. Please go ahead, Ms.
Thank you,
Kiyama.
Professor Kawamori, and thank you to Ko-san and ITU colleagues for inviting ASCAP representative to be part of this. We are very honored. My name is Aiko Akiyama. I've been working on digital inclusion for persons with disabilities for the last 17 years here at ASCAP, particularly from the perspectives of human rights and then development. And then we have been promoting the implementation of CRPD and SDGs. We can go to the next slide. But in this very short time of our intervention, what I'd like to underscore is the importance of strengthening the approach of innovation. Yeah, the slide 2 is okay. Innovation and business approach, which my colleague from WHO also mentioned. Next slide. But just to kind of provide you an overview of who are they, and then once again, my presentation is from viewpoints of persons with disabilities. Here in Asia and Pacific, 15% of our entire population, namely 690 million, are persons with different types of disabilities. 465 million are those with disabilities within the working age range. Now, in 2019, 400 million are older persons, but that number will go up to 605 million, constituting 12% of the entire population of Asia Pacific. Why am I saying that? Because there is an intersectionality between persons with disabilities and older persons. Generally, globally speaking, about at least 46% of older persons could have some form of disability or functional difficulties. So what I'm saying is disability is a transformer of a demographic landscape in this region, meaning those people need more accessible information and access to digital devices. Next to please. Why am I emphasizing on innovation and the business approach? I'm not discounting the value, critical value of human rights realization and then strengthening social protection services and then welfare services for persons with disabilities. But my observation is that it seems to me there has been some kind of vicious cycle of these persons with disabilities and digital inclusion. Before the COVID-19, anyway, there was a digital inequality with regard to persons with disabilities. About 40% of websites are not accessible, not complying with WCC3 standards, enabling persons with visual impairment to access to the information. Now, in Thailand, indicative statistics as follows, right? Persons with disabilities older than 5 years old, only 9.2% of them have access to internet at home, while 64% of the entire households in Thailand have access to it. In terms of a mobile phone, yes, 96% of households in Thailand have the mobile phone, whereas 41% of individual persons with disabilities have it. So that's just a snapshot of a digital inequality. And that inequality exacerbates low access to education, employment, health, politics, and disaster preparedness. Yes, they're having very good practices on targeted approach to improve accessibility for different types of persons with disabilities from social welfare ministries and then in collaboration with some ICT sectors. Nonetheless, not because of the approach, but also for many different factors, including maybe budget, the overall bigger change have not been able to happen. So persons with disability 2 to 6 times unemployed, and then when it comes to disasters, their death rate could be 2 to 4 times as high as those with disabilities. That leads to low income and then inequality in general in society. Now, when intervened by a crisis such as COVID-19, yes, we have such a boom of digital economy and everybody's doing digital communication like we are doing right now. At the same time, economic downturn we are experiencing and people are remotely working, calling for more digital accessibility like any other colleagues in this panel have emphasized. But if the same kind of intervention has been done, then nothing will change in the community of persons with disabilities because website accessibility, or also provision of sign language interpreters or provision of real-time captioning that you can even see on this Zoom, generally have been thought as a last afterthought, not like integrating from the very beginning. So it ends up in the time of crisis like that, many people kind of forget about accessibility for persons with disabilities or those with functional difficulties, and this vicious cycle of worsening inequality continues. Next slide, please. How do we break away? Well, this is just one indication, but if we have more innovation approach from a government, I'm sure there is a sector or ministry or unit dealing with innovation, and there is ICT ministry and units that are majority of our audience today, and then also involvement of business sector can improve that kind of a vicious, the widen the scope of improvement of inclusivity and accessibility for digital products and services. That will enhance persons with disabilities access to development areas and more equitable participation. And then when more people use a lot of digital services and products, and then that means more demands, and that will mean more needs for innovation and then refinement of our products. Let's think about in a concrete terms. When we think about like this online platform of our conferences, I think under the new normals, it puts us, it has a kind of equalizer effect, so to speak, meaning like those of us which apparently do not have a so-called disability, also we frustrate about the lack over the lack of connectivity or interactive connectivity on online conference services, or we don't know how to use it and all the things. But persons with disabilities anyway had that kind of issues before, but then this situation put us more rely on digitalized text. We look at the chat box, we look at emails more than face-to-face communication. So that also is creates a need for all of us to have more easy to use, easy to access online platform conference mechanisms. Also, those of us who live in Asian Pacific, we speak in English with different types of accent. So when it comes to real-time captioning, which is going on right now, they have to capture a heavy accent, and the quality control of English output of captioning has to be done. So there is a need for better product design of such mechanism. Now go to the next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, I might be preaching to the converted because everybody in this crowd knows the father of internet, who is Mr. Van Wint Cerf, but he is hard of hearing. And because of his impairment, he was able to, in a way, create this internet and an email that we use every day. He said it's a crime that the most versatile device on the planet, the computer, had not been adapted well to people who need help, who need assistive technology. So I'm just saying this, that, hey, look at the history. A lot of things that we rely on comes from the needs of vulnerable groups. So like my colleague from WHO said, there has been a lot of business cases showing in numbers in terms of increased profit from different corporate, different companies in the world. LNG, which is financial companies in England, says the website accessibility increased their profitability by 300%. And then because of the time, I'm not going to all of this list, but my point is that there is a ample evidence which point to the need for better business approach to digital inclusion, and we are now at the perfect timing to do that. ICT sector in government, disability sector in government, private sector, and the innovation sector. We can work together to building on this momentum. Last slide, please. For us as SCAP, we are, last slide, please. Yes, we are promoting, we want to continue to work with ITU to this approach and then build capacity in different parts of the Asia Pacific. But we are also looking into some specific schemes such as public procurement to ensure digital accessibility so that the products themselves to be distributed in the government would be digitally accessible, and that would affect on general market. Thank you very much. Over back to you, Professor Kawamori.
Thank you very much for your very interesting, creative presentation based on sustainable growth perspective. I think we have many presentations on the best practices, good practices from different segments of society, government, international bodies, and also we have just seen some of the aspects that are specific to this area. For example, the lack of electricity and last mile requirements from Afghanistan, and also it's related to the perspective of WHO that even a simple ICT can help this bridging the gap of the digital inclusion. And also the last presentation from SCAP, Ms. Akiyama's point about sustainable growth is very important. And so that the not only the international bodies, but also just as the NBTC's and NECTIC is doing in Thailand, that the intergovernmental agencies collaboration to implement some of the policies that are useful and applicable in this region to be identified and then to promote it will be a very good practice, I think. So from this panel session, I would like to propose that ITU regional office take account of this and probably make a report or suggestion on compiling best practices and requirements from this specific area, as well as the possible proposed potential solutions such as BHBM, and also collaboration with other international bodies like SCAP and WHO to promote such solutions in this region. I think that will be a very good move forward to attain the goal of sustainable development goals, as well as developing a inclusive digital society, not only for COVID-19, but for the future. With that, I think our time has, come, and I have to wrap up, and I would like to thank all the panelists and also the audience, and also the ITUD, regional office for this wonderful opportunity to discuss a very important subject. Thank you very much, and I'd like to close this session if that's okay. Is that okay?
Yes. Thank you so much, Professor Kawamori, and also panelists, Ms. Akiyama, Kunotachat, Mr. Mirwais Nakmal, and also Mr. Sami Pujari, for giving us the different sort of perspective in different areas that we need to take a look at when we approach the subject of digital inclusion. So again, thank you very much to all for your insights, and I would now like to hand over the session, the floor to the next moderator, which is Ms. Asuka Okuda, who is going to handle the next session. So on that note, Ms. Asuko, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And welcome again, everyone, to the last session on the way forward towards WTDC 17. In the last 3.5 days, we discussed the persistent and emerging challenges in developing digital connectivity and using digital technology. And because of COVID-19, the existence of the unconnected and underconnected was underlined. In response, ITU members and partners shared their solutions, approaches, initiatives, partnerships, and offered for collaboration throughout the forum, just like in the last session on ICT for all. And I would like to add my appreciation to the moderator and the panelists for shedding light to this critical area of continued assistance that we need to expand in Asia and the Pacific. Now it is time to discuss what's next. How can we carry the discussion outcomes forward so that they will not dissipate and partnerships and collaboration will realize and bring the benefits? For this session, we have four distinctive speakers to shed light on the way forward and how we can prepare for the regional and global deliberations in the coming months and years. Today, we have with us Mr. Stefan Bureau, Deputy to Director, BDT of ITU, Dr. Ahmed Sharafat, Chairman of APT Preparatory Group for WTDC 21, Mr. Bokal Ba, CEO of Semana Telecommunications Council and Chair of IAGDI CRO, and Mr. Ismail Shah, the head of the area office in Jakarta, ITU. Before we move on to the next speaker, I would like to encourage the participants to ask questions and share their views in the Q&A box and chat box. Speakers are also encouraged to answer questions as the session progresses. So, Stephen, can I give the floor to share with us the overview of WTDC and TDAC and how we can be involved in the process? The floor is yours, Stephen.
Good morning, Atsuko. Good morning or good afternoon rather, to our participants and colleagues in the Asia Pacific region. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. I am happy to be able to share the preparatory process, the update on the preparatory process for WTDC 21, which has been ongoing since TDAG 2019, and which is already reaching a point at which we can clearly see that the WTDC 21 is shaping up to be a landmark conference, which will truly bring development change to the ITU and BDT's work globally. May I have the next slide, please? I know many of you will have been involved in various stages of this process as it has started and gone on through over the last year and some. But just to give a very high level background on what the journey has been, we started, as I mentioned a few moments ago, in 2019 at TDAG. And at that stage, really, there were a number of, I think there were breakout sessions and side events where members of ITU, members of BDT, brainstormed around what sort of changes, what should WTDC 21 look like? And this was coming off the back of WTDC 17 in Buenos Aires, which was a great conference, left us with some very real impactful programs. But it was felt at the time that the process was becoming cumbersome and needed a refresh. So at 2019 TDAG, there was a brainstorming sessions and a number of very interesting ideas came out of that. In preparation for TDAG 2020, which at the point, I think we were just about to prepare. I had just joined ITU. COVID had also just joined ITU and had us all working from home. So we decided to convene a number of web dialogues. And Coincidentally, those were the very first virtual events convened by BDT. And we had a series of web dialogues at which participants discussed the way forward, discussed and really just had an open brainstorming session again around what would our process toward WTDC look like. Those led to some interesting discussions at TDAG 2020. TDAG 2020 also virtual, and by this point, I think we just realized we were in the virtual world for a while. So we had TDAG 2020, which was split into 2 meetings, and quite importantly, formed some working groups, leading us to the upcoming TDAG 2020 number 3 and onward in our preparatory process. So I'll start going into a little more detail. Can I have next slide, please, on how those dialogues have gone. Next slide, please. So the web dialogues that I mentioned, it came up with three high-level areas. We talked about the preparatory process, we talked about the conference itself, and we discussed how to address the ITU contribution to the ITU strategic plan, strategic and operational plan. And essentially, the discussions had by this point started to get the concept that making more time in the conference for high-level discussions and spending a bit less of the conference on purely administrative issues and discussing and coordinating around language was desirable, and that would be the best way to drive change at WTDC 2021. So I'm not going to go into any detail on these as we've moved on significantly from here, but this was really the starting point for the discussion on WTDC change. Next slide, please. So TDAG, as mentioned, had created 3 preparatory groups: TDAG WG Prep, chaired by Santiago Reyes-Borda from Canada. And that's a working group on WTDC preparations, and more specifically on the sort of very administrative and procedural issues for the conference itself. So this group would really discuss proposals for conference content, the theme of the conference itself, who would be invited, who would be the stakeholders, how would we deal with issues like the high-level policy statements and other things within the conference. And coincidentally, this group finished its work yesterday. So we'll be reporting to TDAG 2023 on the 23rd of November. Its final report is actually in preparation as we speak. Next slide, please. So some of the updates are on this screen. The last meeting of the TDAG WG Prep was actually held across 2 days. So we had it started on the 20th of October, and we finished our deliberations and discussions yesterday under the able leadership of Santiago. And I'm just going through actually here the updates from the first day, because I don't have a slide on the second day yet. It's a bit too fresh off the press, but I will talk about it a bit. So for the first day, we had come up with the idea that there would be a 2 to 3 day development or partnership segment now included in the conference, which would have, perhaps most critically, expanded participation. So it would not be limited in the way our normal WTDC would be limited to membership only. We would invite other stakeholders who would join in a more interactive and impactful conversation around development, trying to bring together the different partners that would have to be part of any real development solution and development outputs. So the TDAG has agreed, or the working group has agreed to have this recommendation go to TDAG 2020 number 3. This partnership segment, many of you who've been at WTDC will be aware that a lot of time is spent on what are called high-level, the policy statements, in which ministers or high-level attendees from around the world spend, I think usually limited to 3 minutes, but it almost never is 3 minutes, just on a podium speaking. And that takes up a lot of time in the conference and doesn't really have an output except for the speeches by ministers. They aren't really, while I'm sure they will guide each country's behavior outside of WTDC, they don't create any impacts within the conference itself. And it's felt that we should try to incorporate that segment into this new development and partnership segment, but with changes to the approach. so that these ministers would now be engaged in more impactful discussions, whether by way of roundtables or cocktail sessions or sessions where you have donor matching, so that they could bring their real desires for outcomes from WTDC to the table at WTDC and have discussions on those desires and those needs, and potentially have those discussions with the people who could help ITU deliver those needs in countries. So one of the other key changes that the working group agreed on its first meeting on the 20th of October was a recommendation that we should add inter-regional meetings to the preparatory process. Now, this is intended to try to save time within the conference to make space for the 2 to 3 day development segment, because it's felt that if we had additional opportunities for regions to come together, and as this region continues its preparatory process, this is something to bear in mind, that as you come up with your regional ideas and concepts for how the conference should go, this will provide hopefully an opportunity to reach consensus with other regions before we get to the conference. One of the findings from the group was that the conference was increasingly becoming an engagement or disagreement, or each region is coming to the conference with their own positions, and more often we're finding those positions are red lines. You can't cross. We're not going to go beyond this position. We're not going to collaborate. It's hoped that by collaboration earlier on in the process, regions would be able to reach consensus as they build toward the conference, as opposed to just coming to the conference and trying to reach consensus there. So the group is proposing a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 3 interregional meetings, and probably these will be held back to back with the regional preparatory meetings, which the ITU organizes. The timing will have to be arranged and addressed at TDAG, but that's the idea. As I mentioned on this slide, the remainder of this working group's recommendations were to be finalized at the meeting yesterday, and they were finalized. And key points from that, although as I said, I don't have a slide and the final report isn't yet ready, so I can't. I don't want to speak too much on that. But the key points from that is an idea of themes have been produced, which are being finalized. But there's going to be 2 to 3 options for themes going to TDAG on the 23rd of November. So TDAG will be able to select that. The idea of the development partnership segment has been built on a little bit more, so that we now have a great idea on what kinds of partners will be involved. And I'm happy to report that it should include a very broad spectrum of all of the people who will be involved in this, in the development agenda as we move forward. And one of the other key points is around how the interregional meetings will actually be done. There'll still be a bit more discussion on that at TDAG, as final agreement wasn't quite reached. But the thoughts emerging are that regional organizations, and again, very relevant for the region, will be nominating their regional representatives to this meeting, and that those representatives should cover the range of stakeholders who will be involved in the conference moving forward. Next slide, please. So we are, as the other groups, this group, as I mentioned, is just about finished. It's finished its work. The report is expected to be published tomorrow, so that TDAG will be able to discuss it in its session on the 23rd of November. Can I have the next slide, please? So the second group that I want to talk about is TDAG, the working group on resolutions, declaration, and the thematic priorities, which is led by this region's own Dr. Ahmad Sharafat of Iran. And this group is looking much more at the content, at some of the content that goes into WTDC 21, and again, trying to align things before we get to the conference, so that the work at the conference itself will be much more seamless and coordinated, and that countries' presentations and preparations for the conference will be meaningful and able to deliver, be closer to delivery at the conference itself. So a huge amount of work has already gone in by Dr. Sharafat and this group on based on their terms of reference, in terms of which focus on reviewing the resolutions that will go and trying to start the process of, I don't like using the word streamlining, because streamlining is something we do regularly, and I think the group's work is actually going deeper than this. But the idea is to make sure that we that we have an effective approach to the resolutions at WTDC. This group will also look at the ITUD thematic priorities, which many of you will know by now. BDT has been working with as a way to coordinate and consolidate the outputs of WTDC 17, and which we find is a very good way to ensure that BDT's work is properly focused. And the group is also working on the draft declaration. Next slide, please. So this group has had 2 meetings so far, and its last meeting was concluded in late October, and the discussions were again on streamlining resolutions, on declarations, thematic priorities. This group has been liaising very closely with the chairs of the ITUD study groups 1 and 2, and the TDAG working group, the 3rd working group, which I'll also mention on the strategic and operational plan. The chair of the group submitted 3 documents to that meeting that had annexes on the 3 topics. And those documents are very useful and should be reviewed by all members planning to make submissions, because they really deal very well with how we should look at these issues in that group. The group has produced a report which will be submitted to the to TDAG 20/3 as an update. It should be noted, and next slide, this group will continue work over the next, I guess, several months into TDAG 2021. I'm sorry, this is the wrong, I think I missed a slide, but in any event, the WGRDTP group will continue its work to submit a final report to TDAG 2021. The 3rd and final group that I'll discuss this morning is the working group on strategic and operational plan, which is led by Dr. Gonzalez from Spain, one of the TDAG vice chairs. This group is reviewing the ITUD contribution to the strategic plan for the next period, which will be 2024 to 2027. And how this group is going about its work is it's reviewing what's the status of implementation so far of the Buenos Aires Action Plan and its links with the operational plan, and the status of implementation of the 4-year rolling operational plan of ITU, and then to look at areas of improvement and focus areas for consideration by council, and then it will produce an outcome into WTDC 21. But the idea is that this group's work will save on time spent on the strategic and operational plan at WTDC itself, so that it can present the work. The work will technically come as a TDAG output into the conference for noting or just adoption by the conference, as opposed to detailed discussion and so on. So one key point is to urge membership to participate in this group, because this is now going to be the main forum for discussion of BDT's contribution to the strategic plan. And it will continue its work throughout the next year, right up to WTDC. Next slide, please. So this group has been looking at various framing questions. I'm not going to go into detail with these. The slides, I'm assuming, will be available for you to review. And this presentation and the outputs of the group are actually available on the group's webpage through the ITUD website. So next slide, please. But these framing questions are two slides of framing questions really discuss how this group will go about coming up with the contributions to the next strategic plan. And again, the next slide, sorry. Just going quickly through these to allow time for discussion. So this group has had 1 meeting so far, and they've had one contribution on the procedure which proposes modifications to Resolution 1 and 24, which will effectively allow this work to happen and to be contributed into the conference in this way. So this group has submitted liaison statements to the other 2 groups based on this. And then the other thing that the group did, and through a very interesting polling exercise during the calls, it's very good how the use of technology has improved our ability to engage in different ways. So while we don't operate as in physical meetings, the virtual meetings give us options we didn't have before. So this group has prioritized ITUD objectives based on the people attending, which is an important output. And it should be noted, you can note on the screen the prioritization for the objectives in terms of choices. The group found a high level of choice around inclusive information society and modern and secure infrastructure, followed by enabling environment and coordination. Many of you will recognize these four as the pillars based on the current ITU strategic plan. And I think that brings me to the end of this. Next slide, please. I think I have one more. Yeah, so the schedule for this group, again, as I mentioned, this group will continue to meet through into next year and will provide its output into WTDC itself. So it will go first to the 2021 meeting of TDAG, and then there could be further work between TDAG and WTDC for this group as well. Next slide, please. So just finally, how to participate. As I mentioned during the call, during the rest of the slide, sorry, these groups, the WG prep is mostly finished. So attendance at TDAG on the 23rd really is the last opportunity to input into that work, because it's intended that TDAG will either adopt or well, certainly address and finalize those recommendations. The other two groups, though, will continue work, and there's a lot of the documentation is currently available on the website, but there's a lot of very useful information that members should consider looking at and reviewing in preparation for the next meeting. And I know I'm followed by Dr. Sharafat in this session, so I know he's already taken that into account in his work here in the Asia Pacific region on preparation itself. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen, for the updates on the TDAC working groups. So the big date for us is 23rd of November for the TDAC, and I hope that.
Sorry, Atsuko, if I could just make one more intervention just before I close. Yes, I've just forgotten. Monday will be the launch of the road of our WTDC process. So I certainly hope we will see a lot of your our Asia Pacific colleagues at the launch. Information as the invitation has been sent out. I don't want to give away too much, but the program looks very exciting. We have some teasers going out at the moment. I don't know if any of you have seen them, but some teasers are going out heading toward a big reveal on Sunday. So watch that space. Thanks.
Absolutely. And I have that in my closing slides in the next session. Now, Stephen, would you also like to talk about the virtual council meeting?
Right. Actually, yes, that's also an important point. Council will have its second virtual consultation during the week of 16th to the 20th of November. It's a very packed schedule. So, you know, and as many members will know, the agenda and time management plan for council, the agenda is quite hotly negotiated in terms of what will be able to be considered and what will not, because unlike normal council sessions, we really don't have the time that would consider all of the matters. WTDC will be considered, and we hope to have, I think it's the first item on the agenda, so we hope to have some very interesting things happening at the virtual consultation. So I urge you all to tune into that as well. But the agenda's out, and contributions are available. So it is again urging council members and observers to participate.
Thank you, Stephen. And we will send out a follow-up message after the RDF. So perhaps without any questions coming from the participants, we will move on to the next speaker of this session, Dr. Ahmed Sharafat, Chairman of the APT Preparatory Group for WTDC 21, to share with us the steps and meetings that member countries and partners can be involved in Asia and the Pacific. So Dr. Sharafat, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Today, I will present to you the APT's preparations for WTDC 21. And as you know, the next World Telecommunication Development Conference, also known as WTDC 21, is scheduled to take place in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia 1 year from now, from 8th to 19th of November 2021. WTDC is a major world conference organized by ITU to consider topics, projects, and programs relevant to telecommunication ICT development. And APT, as the regional telecom organization with 38 member states, has formed and organized an APT preparatory group for WTDC 21 to consider various issues related to this conference. The objectives of the APT preparatory group for WTDC 2021 are as follows. First, to coordinate on regional activities for WTDC 21, ensuring that the interest of APT members on ICT development issues are properly represented. The activities include the following. First, to assist APT members to prepare for WTDC 21 in coordinating issues of regional interest and the submission of the regional contributions to the conference. Second, to develop proposals from APT members that considers the interest of the Asia Pacific region as inputs to WTDC to WTDC's assembly, and to assist APT members during the WTDC. The terms of reference for this APT preparatory group for WTDC 2021 can be found in the link that is shown on the slide. Next one, please. The structure of the working group, APT working group for WTDC 21 is as follows. We have 3 working groups. The first working group is on programs, study groups, and associated questions. Working group 2 is focusing on working methods, declaration, and action plans. And working group 3 is on general ICT development issues, including regional initiatives. Working group 1, which is on programs, study groups, and associated questions. In this working group, we consider matters relating to ITUD programs, study groups, and associated questions, taking into account the strategic goals and objectives of the ITU in particular to those of ITUD. And then, in addition, we assess the achievements of the relevant parts of the Buenos Aires Action Plan, which was adopted by WTDC 17 in Buenos Aires. Next slide, please. Working group 2 is on working methods, declaration, and action plan. And specifically, we review the ITUD's working methods, particularly in regard to the organization and the procedures associated with the meeting of the Telecom Development Advisory Group, TDAG, and study groups. In addition, we identify any issues that need stronger support and commitment from APT members to prepare draft inputs for declaration and action plan of the WTDC. And finally, working group 3, which is on general ICT development issues, including regional initiatives. We identify key issues for regional ICT development. We discuss and develop proposals for regional initiatives for our region, Asia Pacific. And we also consider other matters not covered by Working Group 1 and Working Group 2. Next. It is my privilege and honor to work with an internationally recognized and knowledgeable team of office bearers in APT WTDC 21. And as you can see, I'm assisted by two vice chairmen, Mr. Norifumi Yamaguchi and Mr. Sung Jun Choi. These are the two vice chairs of APT WTDC 21. And then the office bearers for the three working groups you can see on the screen. Working Group 1 is chaired by Ms. Mina Sonmin Jun, assisted by Ms. Yaping Wang and Ms. Mariam Espandar. In Working Group 2, the chair is Ms. Alexandra Borthwick, assisted by Ms. Tawasawam Samorwong. And Working Group 3 is chaired by Ms. Memiko Utsuki, assisted by Anna Amalina Imam Bawan. You can see that the office bearers of the three working groups, we were very fortunate to have a complete gender reverse balance. All ladies, very capable, are working very hard to achieve the objectives of APT WTDC 21. Next slide, please. As to the work plan for APT WTDC 21, we had our first meeting on 24th of July. The second meeting would be virtual and is scheduled next week on 12th of November in order to prepare ourselves for the forthcoming TDAG meeting in 2 weeks' time. And then our normal schedule would start with the first quarter in 2021. So our second ordinary meeting would be in the first quarter, and in the second quarter we have our third meeting, and in the third quarter of 2021 we would be having our fourth and final meeting. Then from September to October we would be having member consultations to endorse ACPs, and I will tell you what ACPs are in the next slide. And then in October we would submit ACPs to ITU in due time for consideration by WTDC 21. Next slide, please. Now, the deliverables of APT WTDC 21 are categorized into two different types. First is APT Common Proposals, also known as ACPs, which is a document containing the subject on specific subjects developed by the APT WTDC 21. And it requires members of APT, it requires the number of APT members for submission by the Secretary General as a multi-country proposal to another organization. So member consultation is required. And then in addition, we would be having another different type of document, which is called APT View, a view approved by the plenary of APT WTDC 21 on certain matters, which can be submitted to an international organization by the Secretary General on behalf of members participating at that plenary. And again, plenary approval is required. Next slide, please. Now, the conditions for PACPs and ACPs. PACP stands for a preliminary ACP, and ACP is the APT common proposal. So PACPs should be, to the extent possible, be adopted by consensus at the plenary of APT. In cases that consensus is not possible, and there are a difference of opinion, the plenary and further discussions cannot produce consensus, then as a last resort, documents can be adopted, provided that it is supported by at least 1/4 of APT members present at the plenary, and the document is not opposed by a number of members present at the plenary greater than the number of APT members who support it. Next slide, please. So PACPs are required to be circulated to all APT members. And as I said earlier, we have 38 members through the APT Secretariat for endorsement. And on confirmation of a proposal as a PACP, all APT members will be asked to consider inclusion of their country name as a signatory to the proposal. The proposal is supported, the conditions are that the proposal is supported by at least 1/4 of APT members, and the proposal is not opposed by more than 50% of the number of APT members who support it. Next. So the extraordinary meeting of APT-WTDC 21 will be organized and to discuss the outcomes of TDAG working group. And as Stefan already mentioned, the TDAG working group on WTDC preparations finished its work yesterday. So we have our meeting organized, scheduled for November 12th of 2020. The second meeting would be early February. The timing, we are doing consultations to decide on the date. But in that meeting, we would follow up the outcomes of TDAG meeting. TDAG is scheduled on the 4th week of November. So our second meeting of APT preparatory group would be after that to discuss the issues of for WTDC 21 and identify the potential topics for APT common proposals and to prepare APT inputs to RPM, in particular the draft regional initiatives, and to review of the structure and work plan of the group. I would like to use this opportunity to invite representatives of other regional telecommunication organizations to participate in our meeting as observers. Next. So this was a brief overview of what APT, what we're doing in APT in the preparatory process for WTDC 21. And I need to stop here. If there are questions, would be more than happy to provide further clarification. Back to you, Suko. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharafat. Very comprehensive presentation and very clear way forward on the APT preparation processes. I don't see any questions so far in the Q&A box or chat. So perhaps we can move forward to the third speaker. And for participants, if you have any questions, please feel free to pose the questions in the chat box and Q&A. On that note, if we can move on to Mr. Bokal Ba, CEO of Semana Telecommunications Council and Chair of IAGDI and CRO, to share experience and insights from global and interregional preparatory meetings. Mr. Ba, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to all of you from Dubai. As the chair of the Industry Advisory Group for Development Issues and the Private Sector Chief Regulatory Officer meeting, it's an honor and pleasure to be here today at this Asia RDF. Let's spend 2 minutes on the current global context from a private sector perspective. The ICT private sector has a foundational role to play in digital development, and this realization has received worldwide acknowledgement. As you know, almost 53% of the world population, and about, for Asia Pacific region, 48% of the population already use the internet. This is the outcome of trillions of dollars worth of investment from the private sector and deliverance. Now, it is indeed an extraordinary achievement that the private sector, of course, with a special thanks to the effort of the policymakers and regulators, we feel proud of. However, at the same time, we fully comprehend that connecting the remaining 47% unconnected demands unprecedented efforts, enablement, investment, and partnership. There are many such issues that we are to contend with. Colleagues, it's our mutual aim, and I must say a global necessity, that we promptly achieve universal digital access. There are wide differences in issues to be addressed among the countries that make up Asia Pacific region regarding access and use of the internet. Yet, it emerged that regardless of whether challenges arise in relation to the infrastructure, upgradation of or service adoption gap, more collaborative and public-private efforts are required to make our societies and economies stronger and sustainable, and to make us more resilient and master existing and future crises. The private sector is committed to addressing these unacceptable shortfalls jointly with the ITU, the UN member state, and to ensure that we can together contribute to achieving the UN 2030 development agenda. On behalf of the private sector, I am here today with you to reaffirm and convey deep and sustained commitment of the private sector to support and partner with the ITU and the UN member state to accelerate digital development and to take decisions, collaborative steps by acting upon the recommendation put forward by the UN, the ITU, and the private sector. To this effect, a number of ITU platforms are being leveraged by us, by the private sector, to identify priorities for both industry development and also fulfillment of national ICT visions, and also to reflect them into the ITU's development agenda. This platform includes ours, which is IACD CRO, Industry Advisory Group for Development Issue and Chief Regulatory Officer meeting, WTDC, as mentioned by Stefan, and its preparatory processes, study group, ITU Telecom World, GSR, and many others. Our platform, the IACD CRO meeting, is a key facilitating lever for private sector participation within the ITU itself. It's WTDC 17 in Buenos Aires who approved a resolution, which is Resolution 71, and established the IACD CRO platform. This resolution calls for the need to strengthen cooperation between member states, sector member, associate, and academia of the ITU telecommunication development sector, and the evolving role of the private sector. This year, this meeting was held for the first time in the new format, back-to-back with the GSR 2020 on August 31st. The meeting produced an outcome statement and emphasized that priority with increased urgency, as you know, the current situation, should continue to be given to meaningful, secure, affordable, and sustainable broadband connectivity for all. To speed up socio-economic resilience, as we evolve as a human society, propelled and even compelled by this digital revolution. In this regard, the meeting stressed the need for a better enabling environment, including regulatory frameworks that specifically enable connectivity and increased public sector participation in non-economical area or non-viable area. To adapt to this new normal, better preparedness and network capabilities, as well as an increased focus on connectivity and infrastructure investment, were highlighted in the meeting as being essential. This, in essence, called for bold, new, and inclusive approaches that are technology neutral. Further, there is a need to take a long-term perspective that is locally rooted yet cross-border in scope and driven by stakeholders through commitment, collaboration, and partnership. However, we collectively do need to be mindful that such approaches should be non-prescriptive, providing the right balance between commercial and increased public sector involvement, and also be supported by enabling regulation and competitive market forces. This also required a complete rethink of the current financing and funding approaches and mechanisms, as well as existing business model implemented by the private sector. Therefore, a massive collaborative public, private, and cross-industry effort is needed for the next decade. What are the immediate areas that requires the expedient consideration of the policymakers and regulators? I will just list a few of them in terms of priority, which are: number one, ensure availability of sufficient and flexible spectrum. Number two, the USF discussion, review and repurpose USF funds and accelerate also the USF disbursement to address gap in connectivity and maintain and expand networks to ensure better preparedness and resilience of such network. Number three, which is foundational, is the review of industry fees and taxation regime, promotion of infrastructure sharing to lower the capex investment, and harmonization and standardization to enable secure and safe cross-border data movement. Last, and the need also for good governance and agility in regulatory measures to address issues emerging from the use of digital technology. So these are, on a nutshell, the outcome of the discussion that we had and reported in plenary session at the GSR to the regulators for their consideration. And with this, on behalf of the IAGDI CRO platform, I wish to assure the ITU, the member state organization, that the industry as a whole and the private sector as part of the journey toward the digital transformation of, for your region, Asia and Pacific. In each member state, our members will partner with government individually and collectively to forge the best regional approaches for the region, and we look forward toward the policymakers and regulators also to make this journey a fruitful one for the entire world. With that, I would like to thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair and colleagues, and I remain available for any further question related to the private sector platform. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ba, for the very insightful remarks. And it is definitely the case that connectivity development is driven by the private sector. And as such, collaboration is really essential. So I hope that this forum and the ITU activities provide this platform to encourage the dialogues and collaboration moving forward. And we took note of the 3 points plus, including the governance, and we look forward to perhaps unpacking your views and how we can take actions accordingly. So thank you very much, Mr. Ba, for your statements. Now, on that note, I would like to move to the last speaker of the session, my colleague, Mr. Ismail Shah, the head of the area office in Jakarta, to brief us on where we are with the preparation on RPM and perhaps how we can move forward in that direction. So Ismail, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Atsuko-san. And I'd like to thank the earlier speakers. They have made my job very easy, and I thank them for the comprehensive presentation and the detail that they provided. I'll mainly talk about the regional preparatory meetings that for the WTDC 21. As all of you know, it will be held from 8th to 19th November in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. 2021, actually, it should be 21. Next slide, please. Okay, so we already heard about the three committees that Stephen mentioned in detail. So they talked. He talked about their mandate and the input that they have already provided that will be submitted tomorrow. So these are the three committees. He also mentioned that there will be the TDAG meeting will be on the 23rd of November, and it will receive these reports and we'll have a discussion on that. Last but not least, from this Monday, which is 9th of November, we will have the launch of Road to Addis. And again, I'll reiterate all of you to join us in that. Next slide, please. So again, a recap what has happened in this region. We have the APT first WTDC meeting held on 24th July. It was a virtual meeting. The additional one is going to be on 12th of November. Second preparatory meeting of APT scheduled for 2021, February 2021. And the ITU regional preparatory meeting is scheduled for March. For the time being, the tentative dates are 9th to 10th, but we may have an extra day because we would also have the coordination that we will do for the inter-regional meeting, and we'll have coordinate with APT, and we'll also coordinate with the other regional agencies, regional entities in the rest of the world. So next slide, please. Okay, so what we are trying to do at ITU is that we are trying to standardize these regional preparatory meetings. And if you see the essence of especially Stephen's presentation, what we are trying to do is to do all the activities that can be done before the WTDC. So all the items which requires lots of discussion, and that's why we have these interregional meetings and the preparatory meetings. And one of the main reason is that we would like these to be completed before the WTDC, because at the WTDC, when we have all of us here at the WTDC, we should be able to engage more. We have more time to discuss about the collaboration and way forward. So that's why we will have standardized RPMs, the regional preparatory meetings across a different region, starting with the opening ceremony, election of chairperson, vice chairperson, approval of the agenda. And then we will have from each region, for example, in our case, we will discuss the regional trends in Asia and the Pacific. And the fifth agenda item would be reporting on the Buenos Aires Action Plan, which was the WTDC, and also the contribution to the implementation of WSIS Plan of Action and SDGs in the Asia Pacific region. The next agenda item, next slide, please, would deal with reports on the implementation of the outcomes of different ITU conferences, assemblies, and meetings related to ITU D-work and others, especially PP18, WRC 19, the Radio Assembly 19, and WTSA 20. Hopefully that will also be held before that. It is scheduled currently for next year, February and March. Regarding the preparation, we talked about the three reports that we will have. So that will also be discussed. So by that time, we will already have these reports on the three working groups that we talked about and Stephen talked about in detail. So that will also be discussed next. Next slide, please. Then finally, we will have a report on the regional initiatives for the Asia Pacific. As all of you know, we have the 5 regional initiatives that will be discussed, and also identification of new priority areas. And finally, any other business, and that will be the end of the regional preparatory meeting. And as I emphasized, and as the earlier speakers also emphasized, especially Stephen, that the main thing is that we have all the discussion that can happen before the WTTC that should happen in these RPMs and the regional meetings, so that we have we use the time efficiently at the WDC and identifying partnerships and more engagement. So thank you very much. A brief this was a very brief discussion about the RPM. Thank you.
Thank you, Ismail. So we look forward to finalizing it with APT, and we will definitely inform the member countries in due course with the invitation. So thank you. I don't see any questions. There is one. Okay. Question. Sorry. There's no question so far in the chat box and Q&A. And I believe that all the speakers made the points very clearly. So I believe that, yes, there is one question from Mr. Angus Ryok of Australia. The date of the RPM. Ismail, would you like to respond?
Yes, so currently we have the 8th and 9th of March in the calendar that has been identified as the potential dates for this. It might be increased by a day if we are able to have the inter-regional meeting back to back with it.
Thank you. Is there any other question? So if there's no more question, perhaps we should close the session. I would like to thank all the speakers of the session 8. All the interventions were very clear and well structured, and I hope that gave the needed information to start the preparation towards WTDC 2021. And this is, in fact, the end of the substantive sessions of the entire RDF, and the only remaining session is the closing. So if there is no more question, comments, and any final thoughts from the speakers, I would like to move on to the final session, the closing. I think there is none. So I would then, thank you, move on to the closing. It is a great pleasure to welcome you all to this closing of the 2020 Regional Development Forum for Asia and the Pacific. It is a happy moment for all of us to celebrate the successful organization of all the sessions in the last 4 days. But it is a sobering moment to realize that the challenges we face are indeed daunting and enormous. And without partnerships and collaboration that we have seen on during this RDF in the past 4 days, it would be very difficult to overcome for one organization or country. In this sense, the forum, I believe, was successful and very timely, and confirmed the partnerships and initiatives, and with member countries, some of the way forward to 2021. We have a short presentation to summarize the last 4 days. So I hope that we can start with the day one. As if you recall, we had a pre-session on the Pacific, Digital Pacific, followed by the opening of the ministers and the Prime Minister of Vanuatu, who officially opened the session, and the RDF 2020. Next slide, please. And we captured some of the quotes from the opening session, as well as the panel discussion with the 3 UN resident coordinators. And these will be posted on the social media. And I hope that you can share or retweet in your community as a guide to prepare for our 2021 activities, as well as the regional initiatives beyond. Thank you. Next slide, please. So the day two started with the focus on connectivity and the policy. So we had an excellent session on the affordable inclusive connectivity, as well as how to enhance the connectivity in partnership with the private sector. And we had a good mixture of development banks and private sector member country and civil society. And we also had a session on digital applications and digital services, so that the connectivity will deliver the benefits to achieve SDG and Connect 2030 agenda. And we had a launching of the COP guidelines, and I hope that we can take actions and operationalize the guidelines at the national and local levels and in different stakeholder groups. Next slide, please. Yesterday, we had continued and exciting partnership sessions, starting with the policy and regulation, looking at different aspects of evidence-based policy making and regulation, and followed by the SMEs. We had an exciting discussion on digital ecosystem and some key elements of that ecosystem, followed by the discussion with academia, moderated by UNU, and that led to the follow-up discussion in a session on capacity development. And the last session on the day was cybersecurity, which is a critical element to develop the secure and safe ICT environment. So that led the final day today. Next slide, please. So we had a session on ICT for all, followed by the previous session on the way forward towards WTDC 2021. And I hope that all the outcomes and discussions, partnerships and initiatives will be captured and will be implemented and materialized in the form of 2021 operational plans, regional initiatives, and beyond that, a concrete project that we can develop among all of us. Next slide, please. So this is some of the highlights from today. And again, some of the information quotes will go out on our social media today and tomorrow. Next slide, please. We also want to highlight the fact that our sessions were live broadcast on YouTube, and the video clips are available on YouTube. So if you or your colleagues missed some of the sessions that you wanted to attend, please feel free to visit our website and our YouTube channel. Next slide, please. And again, I want to reiterate that the RDF report is available online, and your comments, suggestions, and questions are welcome that will be that will feed into the planning process for 2021 and beyond as well. Next slide, please. And just to also share with you the stats on the RDF participation and the viewer numbers. We had at least 225 participants registered in the system. And we also noticed that 286 participants registered on the Zoom, and we had over 600 viewers on the YouTube channel. So I believe that from the numbers, our forum was a very successful. Next slide, please. And for this forum, as you noticed, we had a Chinese interpretation, and I would like to recognize Shen, Son, and Jin, our Chinese interpreters who helped us throughout the entire meeting to make sure that our sessions are accessible to Chinese audience. And I would also like to thank our captioners who made sure that we practice the ICT accessibility throughout the session. And this captioning, I believe, was useful for non-English speakers as well. So thank you all. And I also want to extend our appreciation to Debbie, Deborah, and Aline, who supported us with the online virtual platform to make sure that all the technical elements are in place before the session every day. So I want to express our special appreciations to all of you. The next slide, please. I would like to also highlight some of the upcoming events to for your consideration and participation. We have Equals Tech Awards 2020, and it is coming up very soon on 6th November at 8 p.m. Bangkok time. So please feel free to join us and follow the Twitter on Equals. Next slide, please. And on 9th of November, as Stephen highlighted, the WTDC 21 countdown will start, and it'll be the WTDC 21 will be hosted by the government of Ethiopia to be organized from 8th to 19th November 2021. And again, social media entries, tweets, and the messages will be shared and posted throughout. So please feel free to retweet and share on your networks and on your account. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And as Stephen mentioned, to highlight some of the key dates which came out from the session 8, the TDAC will be organized on 23rd of November. So please mark your calendar. And I would like to encourage our member countries and the members to attend and participate in this important virtual meeting. And if I can also add the two more meetings, there will be an APT extraordinary WTDC meeting on 12th of November and virtual council meeting from 16th to 20th of November. Next slide, please. In addition, as we discussed throughout the forum, ITU Regional Office is planning to follow up some of the discussion points and to implement the partnerships that we shared with the participants. And these are some of the events that we would like to highlight at the closing So please feel free to join us in those events and more to come in 2021. Next slide, please. So thank you very much for your attention and patience. And before I conclude, I would like to express my special appreciation also to the ITU colleagues who spent long hours for several weeks now and late into evenings and over the weekends. Without their dedicated commitment, this forum would not have been possible. And I would like all the ITU colleagues to switch on the camera to recognize all your hard work and commitment. We are still missing a few more. That's okay. And I would like to propose a virtual upload to all of them. So thank you very much for all your hard work. And there were some unexpected events, changes. Perhaps you haven't seen it yet on the screen, but there were a lot of coordinations, messaging flying back and forth where you may not have seen. And as a concrete next step, our office have already started contacting our member countries, focal points to discuss the outcomes of this forum and planning of future activities. And I look forward to meeting all of you in the coming weeks. And we will also develop the RDF activity and outcome reports and circulate it widely and online. Now, before I close officially the session, if there's anyone who wish to share the final words or comments, aspirations, inspirations, what you uh, have taken. Yes, Ismail.
Yes, so I'd like to thank all of us, and you also actually you thanked us, but you are one of those who also worked very very hard with all the team, and our team from the HQ. Stephen have been waking up very early, and so have been some other of our colleagues in from the HQ and other parts of the world. And I really would like to thank the participants because you see, it was very consistent, and I could see all the attendees and participants. They were there with us for several hours. So really, it was very heartening to know that the efforts that are being made by ITU are recognized because we saw that. And then the panelists, the way their enthusiasm and their willingness to work with ITU, I really believe that was also, I mean, I really appreciate that, and I could see it in the way the questions, the comments, and in their presentations. So this is really heartening when you see that actually the work that ITU is doing is being recognized, and we are now actually looking for renewing old partnership, and also going for new partners. So it's very heartening. So when you work so hard, after that, when you see this, actually, that's actually the compensation that you receive. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ismail. And if Stephen could carry our appreciations to all the HQ colleagues, and especially Doreen, who opened and moderated the opening session. And as you have seen, there are many HQ colleagues who participated throughout the session. So it was truly joint efforts among the ITU colleagues as well. And Stephen, thank you very much for waking up several days already. So we really appreciate it. So is there anyone else who wish to take the floor? This is the last opportunity. And I wish to recognize. Amir and
Mr.
Rudy
Sharafat has a raised hand.
Mr. Arafat.
and
Uh,
Andreas. Yes,
Dr. Sharafat wants to say something.
yes, Dr. Sharafat, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Atsuko. I just want to express my deep appreciation to you personally for all the hard work, and to other colleagues in the regional office and in the area office in Jakarta as well. You have done a magnificent job, which we do appreciate in our region. And we look forward to working with you more closely in the coming weeks and months and days as our preparations for WTDC intensifies. The road ahead is an interesting one, may not be an easy one, but definitely an interesting one. We are doing our best to achieve consensus. This is our prime objective in our preparatory group by APT for WTDC 21, and also for the TDAG working group on resolution declaration and thematic priorities that I'm chairing. Rest assured that everything that can be done will be done, and we would benefit from your wisdom and your experience of all colleagues in the regional office, particularly yourself, and also in the area office, specifically Dr. Shah. And let's hope for the best. My last word, Atsuko, is that these are very difficult times because of COVID-19. And it would be very advisable to be extra cautious, and please stay healthy and safe. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharafat, for your kind words. And we also rely on your wisdom and the leadership, and look forward to working very closely with you and the working groups moving forward. Thank you. Anyone else who wish to take the floor? The final words? If not, we will close. Okay, Amel, please go ahead.
Thank you, Tsuko. In line with what was discussed by our colleagues in this last session on how we are trying to shift the WTDC from the past one, our aim of this RDF was also to move on these lines, to shift the RDF from our previous ways of doing to this new. So I hope that we have been successful, but we will listen to our membership in the coming weeks and how successful we have been, and then we could determine if our effort has been, fruitful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amel. And in particular, Amel, Rudy, Sean, and Andreas worked tirelessly, almost 24 hours a day for the past 1 week or two. So this meeting's success, all credit to them. So thank you, Amel and Rudy, Sean, and Andreas. Is there anyone else who wish to take the floor? If not, I will close the RDF 2020 and hope to see you soon in one of the upcoming meetings, and of course, RDF 2021. Thank you. Please stay safe and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. So thank you all for taking care of the everything. Now, Adil, I'm just wondering, did you change quickly? You're on mute. Oh, I see. Okay. No, it's good.
It's a magic
This is
show.
our session today, so yes. So I know that the 2:45 session may start. I'm not sure how many people will stay. So if there is no one, you can close and officially end the RDF. Um, Unfortunately, I have another meeting on the famous assessment group of OP 2021. So I have to jump off very quickly and I have to go back to my normal life of more meetings back to back. But
Asuko-san,
I just want, yes,
very sorry, but Angus is raising his hand. I worry it's about them, this wanting to know whether or not how we're going through with the next session. It could be. So, uh,
oh, I see. Okay,
shall we respond?
then let's move on very quickly to the social networking. Yes, he's still there, right?
Yeah.
How many participants are in the session?
Well, we have about 15 in the
Okay.
attendees. So.
Excellent, excellent speaker.
Good to see you after a long time.
Uh, our participants and panelists were waiting for this informal
Okay.
approach. So we have to give some kind of like a way how we want to organize. So just let's start with an informal interview. So Ismail, how the COVID has changed your delivery in ITU?
So actually, I mean, I like this working from home actually because uh, previously I had to wake up at a certain time and also go through all the activities. But now I can actually just sit in front of the computer without getting ready, like for example, wearing a suit or having a breakfast. And then whenever I get a break, then I can go and have my breakfast, and so it has allowed me more flexibility. Also, the travel to the office and all the other formalities, taking your computer, opening, closing, all that has become very easy for me. So I like it, but then on the other hand, there are some difficulties also, because as you know, we have a time difference with Geneva. So we have to do work in our time zone, and then they also wake up, and then they have also involved us in many things because everything is online. So then we have to work very late. So for me, it's kind of working in two shifts. One is the morning shift, then a break of maybe in an hour, and then another shift starts. So it's a little bit, I mean, flexibility also, but more work, more meetings. And at times I believe that I don't get enough time to do things like, not that these meetings are not productive, but like, for example, if I have to write a report or if I have to work on something which requires concentration, so I don't have that because there are back-to-back meetings. But we are learning also, for example, at ITU, and we are introducing a discipline, reducing the meetings. So I think this will continue. I would say that maybe in the future they will still have work from home as the predominant way of working.
That's interesting. So all the participants, now you have full access to the video, and please do share your video if you want to chip in with your uh, anything regarding the RDF or how we should do about things. Uh, Please, you can chip in, and you can turn on your video as well. You have all the rights now, just as like all the panelists. So we all are panelists in this informal way. So, anyone who would like to share, Ashish, maybe, how did you find RDF?
Well, this was very interesting. Actually, the value creation I saw was fantastic because we could see so much innovation going around, not only around us, but around outside us and the engagement. So really, it's a big learning experience. I think I really enjoyed it. But I'm very keen to hear from some of our members or other colleagues what they felt about it, or what are the areas where we can pick up and build more programs in ITU going forward. Thanks.